I'm Willow, 33, female. I live alone in a small town surrounded by rolling hills and giant, spinning monuments to modern energy. As a wind turbine technician, my life is about heights, precision, and self-reliance, qualities that helped me save every penny to buy my first home. It was supposed to be the biggest achievement of my life, a symbol that the quiet tool, savvy daughter had finally made it. Instead, it became the moment I realized the family I thought I had was just an illusion, built to revolve around my younger sister. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. For as long as I can remember, I've been the capable one, the daughter who could change a tire by age 12 and rewire a lamp by 15. My dad, David, a retired construction manager, used to call me his little engineer. It was a title I wore with pride, thinking it was a term of endearment. Only later did I realize it was a label of convenience. While I was under the hood of a car, my sister, Jessica, was being taught how to present herself to the world. She was 3 years younger, prettier, and infinitely more charming. Our mother, Karen, poured all her energy into sculpting Jess into the perfect socialite, while I was left to my own devices. Willow can handle herself, Mom would say with a dismissive wave whenever I needed help with something that wasn't mechanical. This dynamic defined our lives. Jess got praise for good grades. I got a nod for rebuilding an engine. Jess went to college for marketing on a hefty allowance. I went to a technical school on scholarships and part-time jobs. When she landed a job as a real estate agent, my parents beamed with pride, hosting a dinner party to celebrate her esteemed career. When I became a certified wind turbine technician, a highly skilled and well-paying job, they just said, "Oh, that's nice, is it safe?" The ultimate proof of my self-reliance came when I bought my first house. It wasn't a sprawling mansion, but it was mine. A cozy 2-bedroom bungalow with a big backyard, bought with my own money, earned hundreds of feet in the air. I spent months renovating it, pouring my sweat and skills into every detail. I sanded the floors, updated the wiring, and built a beautiful patio deck with my own 2 hands. I was immensely proud. This house was my testament. It was a physical manifestation of my independence and hard work. The housewarming was set for a Saturday. I sent out invitations a month in advance. My best friend and colleague, Ben, was the first to RSVP. My parents and Jess, however, were vague. "We'll see, sweetie. It's a busy time," Mom said over the phone. Jess just sent a thumbs-up emoji. I pushed aside the familiar pang of disappointment, telling myself they were just figuring out their schedules. I planned everything meticulously, catered barbecue, a cooler full of drinks, lawn games. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted, for once, for them to see my world, to celebrate my achievement with genuine joy. The day before the party, I called my mom to confirm. Her voice was strangely high, pitched. "Oh, honey, of course we're coming. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Jess is excited too." I hung up, a wave of relief washing over me. I finally felt like I was going to get my moment. The day of the party was perfect. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Ben arrived early, carrying a ridiculously oversized toolbox as a housewarming gift. "Just in case you didn't have one," he joked, and we both laughed. He helped me set up the last of the string lights on the patio, his easygoing presence a comfort. My other friends and a few coworkers started to arrive around 2 p.m. The house was filled with laughter and music. People complimented the renovations, the food, the view from the deck. But with every car that pulled up, my heart did a little leap, only to fall when I saw it wasn't my family's sedan. By 4 p.m. there was still no sign of them. I checked my phone. No calls, no texts. I tried calling my mom, but it went straight to voicemail. I called my dad, same result. Then I tried Jess, voicemail. A knot of anxiety began to tighten in my stomach. They lived only 40 minutes away. Even with traffic, they should have been here by now. Ben must have noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, Willow?" he asked, handing me a cold drink. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just waiting on my family. They must be running late." But I knew deep down something was wrong. This wasn't just running late. This was different. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over my backyard. The party was a success by all accounts, but for me, it felt hollow. My friends were celebrating my achievement, but the people whose approval I'd craved my entire life were absent. As the last guest left around 9 p.m., I stood alone on the patio I had built, surrounded by the remnants of a party that felt more like a wake. The string lights twinkled mockingly above me. Just as I was about to go inside and start cleaning, my phone buzzed. It was a single text from my mom. It read, "So sorry, sweetie. Something came up with Jess. So proud of your new home, though. We'll celebrate soon. Zoxo." Something came up, that was it. No explanation, no call. Just a casual, dismissive text message after hours of silence. The knot in my stomach turned into a cold, heavy stone. I sank into one of the patio chairs, the cheerful lights blurring through the tears welling in my eyes. The silence of my empty house was deafening. I had built this home to be a place of warmth and belonging, but on its very first day of celebration, my own family had made it feel like the loneliest place on earth. My pride had shattered, replaced by that old, familiar feeling. I was the afterthought. I was the capable one, the one who could handle disappointment because, well, I always had to. That night, sitting alone amidst the party debris, I finally understood that their love wasn't unconditional. It was conditional upon my sister not needing anything. I spent the next day in a fog of hurt and confusion, mechanically cleaning up from the party. The cheerful congratulations. Balloons seemed to mock me from the corners of the room. I reread my mother's text a dozen times, the phrase "something came up with Jess" echoing in my mind. What could have been so important, so urgent, that my entire family would ghost my housewarming? A medical emergency? A crisis? If so, why wouldn't they have just said that? The vagueness was the worst part. It felt disrespectful. On Sunday evening, while mindlessly scrolling through social media to numb the sting, I saw it. A friend of Jessica's had posted a series of photos. The first one was a group shot, a massive, shiny red ribbon stretched across the front of a brand new luxury SUV. Standing proudly beside it were my parents, Karen and David, and in the center, beaming like she'd just won an Oscar, was Jessica. Her caption was sickeningly sweet. "Congrats to my bestie at Jess Realty Queen on her new ride. All that hard work paying off. So glad your amazing family could be there to celebrate with you." I clicked on Jess's profile. Her own post was even more elaborate. There were dozens of pictures and videos. My parents clinking champagne glasses with her. My dad putting his arm around her, pointing out features of the car. My mom wiping away a fake tear of pride. The timestamp on the first post was 3:15 p.m. on Saturday, the exact time they should have been at my house celebrating with me. They hadn't just missed my party. They had actively chosen to skip it for something else, something they deemed more important, celebrating my sister buying a car. A depreciating asset she likely bought on credit, celebrated over the house I built with my own hands and savings. The air left my lungs. It wasn't a crisis. It wasn't an emergency. It was a car. They had lied. My mother's text, "Something came up," was a deliberate, calculated deception designed to spare my sister's feelings, not mine. I felt a hot flush of anger so intense it made me dizzy. I scrolled through the comments on Jess's post. "Wow, gorgeous, you deserve it." And then, the one that broke me, a comment from my own mother's account. "Our brilliant daughter, we are always so proud of your accomplishments. Always so proud." The words felt like a physical blow. They had never once said anything like that to me, not publicly, not privately. My achievements were practical, dirty, and unseen. Hers were shiny, new, and Instagrammable. I collapsed onto my couch, the phone slipping from my hand. The lie was so blatant, so disrespectful. They didn't even have the decency to be honest. They just assumed I wouldn't find out, or perhaps worse, that if I did, I would just swallow my hurt like I always did. The capable one, the one who could handle it, but this time was different. Seeing their smiling faces, celebrating her while completely ignoring me, wasn't just a slight, it was a declaration. It was them telling me, in the clearest possible terms, where I stood. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. The foundation of my relationship with them cracked, and I knew it could never be repaired. The anger didn't fade, it simmered, morphing into a cold, hard resolve. For days, I went through the motions, climbing turbines, running diagnostics, my mind 1,000 miles away. Ben noticed. "You've been quiet," he said during a lunch break, perched on a platform overlooking the valley. Party hangover. I shook my head, and to my surprise, the whole story came pouring out. The house, the party, the text, the Instagram post. He listened patiently, his expression growing more serious with every word. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes. He just said, "That's not just unfair, Willow. It's cruel. What are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer yet, but his validation lit a fire in me. I wasn't overreacting. My parents and Jess tried to call a few times in the following week. I ignored them. I needed space to think. The image of that luxury SUV kept bothering me. Jess was a real estate agent in a decent market, but she wasn't a superstar. She lived a lavish lifestyle, always showing off new designer bags and expensive vacations. I'd always assumed she was just better with money, a natural go-getter, as my mom called her, but a brand new top-of-the-line SUV. That was a $60,000 vehicle, at least. Something didn't add up. My dad, being a retired accountant, had always managed the family's finances, including a small trust fund my grandparents had set up for both me and Jess. It wasn't a fortune, but it was meant to be a nest egg for a major life event, like a down payment on a house. We were supposed to get access to it when we turned 30. I had used my share, exactly $25,000, for the down payment on my house. I assumed Jess had done the same or was saving hers, but now a suspicion started to creep in. I began digging. My name was still on some of the shared family utility accounts for my parents' home, which gave me online access. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but I justified it. They had invaded my life with their lies. I started with the shared phone bill. The call logs showed dozens of long calls between my mom and Jess in the weeks leading up to my party. Normal, perhaps, but the frequency was unusual. Then I found what I was looking for. My dad had always been meticulous about his records. I remembered he used a cloud storage service to back up all his important financial documents, and we had a shared family account. I logged in, my heart pounding. Tucked away in a folder labeled Family Finances was a subfolder titled Trust. Inside were the statements. My statement showed my withdrawal, clean and simple. Jessica's was a different story. It showed her initial $25,000 balance, but then I saw a series of other documents, scanned letters from my father to the trust administrator, bank transfer confirmations. Over the past 5 years, starting just after Jess turned 25, my parents had been systematically draining their own retirement savings and funneling the money into her trust account under the guise of gifts. The total was staggering. Over $100,000. They had effectively been funding her entire lifestyle, her vacations, her designer wardrobe, and I was now certain the massive down payment on her new car. They hadn't just celebrated with her, they had paid for it. They had sacrificed their own financial security to prop up her glittering, fake life, while I had worked my fingers to the bone to build mine. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't about favoritism anymore. It was about a long, deliberate, and financially devastating deception. The discovery of the secret funds left me numb. It was one thing to be the less favored child. It was another to learn I was the only child expected to be an adult. My parents had been treating Jessica like a pampered teenager while I was building a life, assuming responsibilities and contributing to my own future. Their financial recklessness was astounding. My dad, the meticulous accountant, had been blinded by my mother's obsession with Jessica's public image. I spent the next week thinking, not about revenge in the traditional sense, but about justice. They had created an imbalance, and I needed to correct it. Continuing to dig through the shared cloud drive, I found something even more significant. The original will and testament of my grandparents, the ones who had set up the trust. I read through the dense legal language, and one clause stood out. My grandfather, a farmer who valued land and hard work above all else, had also left the family farmhouse and its surrounding 50 acres of land to be split equally between my parents and his brother. However, there was a specific provision. If my uncle ever decided to sell his half, he was legally obligated to offer it to my father's lineage first, at a price determined by the original property assessment from the time the will was written, adjusted only for inflation. My heart quickened. My great-uncle was in his late 80s and had been talking about moving into a retirement community for years. The farmhouse property was prime real estate now, sitting right at the edge of an area designated for a massive new wind farm development. The land was worth a fortune, far more than the old inflation, adjusted price. My dad had always spoken of it as his ultimate retirement plan. He would buy out his brother for a low price and then sell the entire property to developers for millions. He probably assumed I had no idea about this clause. This was my leverage. This was the key. Their entire plan for a comfortable, lavish retirement, the one they were currently sabotaging to buy my sister Suvs, was pinned on this land deal. I called Ben and explained the situation. So your dad's plan to fund their retirement and Jess's lifestyle depends on your great-uncle selling his half of the farm to him at a massive discount, he clarified. Exactly, I replied, but the will says to his lineage, that includes me. Ben let out a low whistle. Willow, you could intercept the whole deal. My plan began to form. It was audacious, but the months of feeling second best had hardened me. First, I needed to know my great uncle's intentions. I drove out to the old farmhouse that weekend. He was thrilled to see me, offering me iced tea on the porch. We talked for hours about his life, my work, and the farm. Gently, I brought up his plans for the future. Honestly, Willow, he sighed, this place is too much for me now. I've been meaning to call your father, offer him my half as your grandfather wanted. I'm ready to sell. This was it. I took a deep breath. Uncle, before you call him, could I make you an offer? I'd like to buy your half, for the price stipulated in Grandpa's will. He blinked, surprised. You, child, what would you do with it? I have plans, I said calmly. Plans that honor what Grandpa built. Seeing my earnestness, he smiled. Your grandfather always said you had the most sense in the family. All right, Willow, it's a deal. We shook on it. I had just secured my family's most valuable asset right from under their noses. The game had changed, with the deal legally in motion with my grey uncle. The final piece of my plan was to orchestrate a confrontation. I couldn't just let this victory happen in silence. They needed to understand the consequences of their actions. After 2 weeks of ignoring their calls, I finally answered a call from my mother. Her voice was a mixture of relief and irritation. Willow, finally, we were so worried. We've been meaning to come see your house. I cut her off, my voice calm and level. I'm hosting a dinner party this Saturday at my house. I expect you, Dad, and Jessica to be there. We have important family matters to discuss. The authority in my tone left no room for argument. She stammered a yes, of course, and I hung up. That Saturday, I prepared a simple dinner. I wasn't trying to impress them anymore. When they arrived, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Jessica walked in, glancing around my living room with a critical eye. It's cute, Willow, very rustic. My parents offered awkward compliments. We sat down at the dining table, the silence broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. Willow, we know you're upset about the housewarming. Your mother and I are very sorry. It's just that Jess had this big day. I know all about Jessica's big day. I interrupted, placing my fork down. I saw the pictures of her $60,000 car, the one you paid for. 3 sets of eyes widened in shock. Jessica paled. What are you talking about? She scoffed, but her voice wavered. I'm talking about the $100,000 you've funneled from your retirement accounts into her trust fund over the last 5 years, I said, looking directly at my parents. The money that paid for her vacations, her clothes, her life. While I was working 2 jobs to get through school, you were funding a fantasy. My mother, Karen, gasped. How could you invade our privacy like that? How could you lie to me? I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. You skipped the biggest day of my life for a car you bought with your retirement money. And you sent me a dismissive text because you thought I was too stupid or too passive to find out. My dad, David, looked down at his plate, his face ashen. He knew I had him. Willow, it's complicated. He began. No, it's not. I said, my voice dropping to a steely calm, it's very simple. You made your choice. You chose to invest in Jessica, not as a daughter, but as a status symbol. You've gambled your financial future on her. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Then I delivered the final blow. I was talking to Great Uncle last week. He's ready to retire and sell his half of the farm. My dad's head snapped up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. This was his escape hatch, his way to fix the financial mess he'd made. He told me he was going to call you. He said eagerly. He did more than that, I said, leaning forward. He sold it to me. I now own 50% of the family farm. According to Grandpa's will, any development deal now requires my signature. Your entire retirement plan is now in my hands. The color drained from my father's face. Jessica looked back and forth between us, confused, then horrified as she realized the implications. My mother just stared, her mouth agape. The silence in the room was absolute. They had spent years underestimating me, seeing me as the reliable, unglamorous background character in the Jessica show. In one evening, I had taken control of the entire narrative. I had leveraged the very legacy they were counting on and used their own rules against them. The power dynamic in our family had just been irrevocably shattered, right there at my dining room table. The aftermath of the dinner was chaotic. Jessica was the first to break the silence, screaming that I had stolen from them, that I was trying to ruin her life. My mother started crying, accusing me of being cruel and vindictive. My father just sat there, looking like a man who had watched his entire future go up in smoke. I didn't engage. I simply stood up and said, I think it's time for you to leave my house." They left in a storm of slammed doors and angry words. In the weeks that followed, my dad tried to salvage the situation. He called, begging me to reconsider. He offered to make things right, to pay me back the money they had given Jessica if I would just sign over my half of the farm. I refused. The money was never the point. I told him calmly over the phone, "The point was the choice you made. You can't buy back my trust." He eventually stopped calling. My mother and Jessica cut off all contact, choosing instead to paint me as a villain to anyone who would listen. According to their version of the story, I was a jealous, greedy daughter who had robbed her own family. Some distant relatives believed them, but the people who truly knew me, like Ben, knew the truth. My life became quieter, but also more peaceful. I focused on my work, on my friendships, and on my home. The house no longer felt like a monument to their rejection. It felt like my sanctuary. Ben and I spent weekends working on it, building a garden in the backyard and laughing more than I had in years. I also took control of my new asset. I met with the wind energy company that was planning the new development. With my technical background, I was able to negotiate a far better deal than my father ever could have. I structured a long-term lease agreement for the land instead of an outright sale, ensuring a steady, substantial income for decades to come, while also stipulating that the land be maintained and respected. It was a legacy my hardworking grandfather would have been proud of. About a year later, I heard through the grapevine that Jessica had been forced to sell her luxury SUV and that my parents had to downsize their home. Their reckless spending had finally caught up with them, and without the farm sale to bail them out, they were facing the consequences. I felt a brief, sharp pang of something, not pity, but a sad acknowledgement of what they had thrown away. They had traded a daughter for a mirage of success, and now they had neither. I haven't spoken to them since that dinner. Cutting ties with my family was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it was also the most liberating. I learned that my value isn't determined by their approval. It's determined by my own actions, my integrity, and my ability to build a life, and a home, on my own terms. I am no longer the capable one who silently cleans up their messes. I am simply Willow, a woman who stands on her own 2 feet, both on the ground and 400 feet in the air.